The night was colder than death. The human explorer walked slowly across the frozen plain, his boots sinking into deep white snow. The wind howled like a living creature, carrying sharp ice against his face. He pulled his scarf tighter, his breath turning into a cloud that froze almost instantly. The planet was empty, silent and merciless. He had been walking for hours, searching for signs of life, or maybe signs of wreckage from the scanners on his ship. But all he found was snow, endless snow. Above him, the sky was black, filled with two pale moons casting silver light over the ice desert. It was beautiful, but also dangerous, a world where one mistake could end a life. The human's name was Daniel, a lone traveler between stars. He had seen many worlds before, but this place felt different. Something about the silence made him uneasy. His instincts told him he was not alone. He stopped, listening. The only sound was the wind. Then faintly, he heard something else. A soft, weak cry almost lost under the storm. Daniel turned his head, his eyes wide. He thought it was his mind playing tricks, but then he heard it again. A muffled voice, fragile, desperate. It was not the wind, it was something alive. He ran forward, digging through the snow with his hands. The sound grew louder, two voices now, weak and trembling. He dug faster, ignoring the pain as the ice cut his skin. Finally, his hand touched something not snow, a body cold and shaking buried under the white prison. He pulled it up. It was not human. The figure had silver skin that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Her eyes glowed softly, half closed from exhaustion. Her lips moved, whispering words he did not understand. Beside her, still buried, was another figure almost the same. He dug again, pulling the second one out. Two sisters, alien, fragile, close to death. Their thin clothes were frozen, their hands blue from cold. They clung to each other, shivering, too weak to stand. Daniel looked around, the storm growing stronger. They would not survive another hour outside. He grabbed them both, one over each shoulder, and pushed through the snow. The wind screamed. The ground shook as the blizzard rose higher. His legs were heavy, but he did not stop. He knew if he stopped, they all would die. Through the white fog, he saw a shadow, a dark opening in the side of an ice cliff, a cave, maybe shelter. With the last of his strength, he carried them inside. The cave was dark but dry. He lowered the sisters gently onto the ground. Their glowing eyes blinked weakly, following his every move. He pulled out a small fire starter from his pack and lit a flame. Orange light spread across the cave walls. The sisters flinched at first, then reached their hands toward the heat. Daniel gave them his emergency blanket, wrapping it around their trembling forms. They huddled close together, their skin slowly losing its icy color. He opened a ration pack, giving them water and a small piece of dried food. They touched it with hesitation, then ate, their strength returning bit by bit. For a while, none of them spoke. The storm outside roared like an angry beast, but inside the cave, there was only firelight and breathing. Daniel studied them carefully. They were unlike any alien he had seen before. Their silver skin reflected the flames, their hair shimmered like liquid crystal. Their faces were strange, yet beautiful, almost human in some ways. But their eyes, large, glowing with soft light, were truly otherworldly. The sisters whispered to each other in a language Daniel could not understand. Their voices were musical, soft but filled with fear. One of them looked at him, then pointed to her chest, whispering a name, Lyra. The other followed, touching her heart with trembling fingers. Celine. Daniel nodded slowly, pointing to himself. Daniel. They repeated it softly, their voices weak but warm. For the first time since landing on this frozen world, Daniel felt a strange connection. These two were more than survivors, more than strangers. They were lost souls clinging to him for life. And deep inside, he knew his journey had just changed forever. But outside, the storm was not the only danger. From the distance, hidden in the white winds, strange shapes moved. Machines, scanning. hunting, searching the land. The sisters glanced toward the cave entrance with fear in their glowing eyes. They knew what was out there. Daniel did not. Not yet. The fire crackled inside the cave. Daniel's hands trembled from exhaustion, but he forced himself to stay awake. The two sisters, Lyra and Celine, sat close to the flames, wrapped tightly in his emergency blanket, their bodies still shaking from the cold. He watched them carefully, afraid they might slip back into unconsciousness. He had saved their lives for now, but he knew the danger was not over. The storm outside roared like a wild beast. Snow slammed against the cave entrance and the wind whistled through tiny cracks in the ice. Daniel added more fuel to the fire, the only thing standing between them and freezing death. The sisters stared at the flames as if they had never seen such a thing before. Their glowing eyes reflected the light, and for a moment Daniel felt as if he was sitting with two beings made of starlight. Lyra coughed, her voice weak. She tried to speak in broken human words, her accent heavy. "Why, help us?" Daniel looked at her surprised. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to answer. Finally, he said slowly, "Because you were dying?" The words seemed simple, but Lyra's eyes widened as if kindness itself was something rare. She exchanged a glance with Celine, who whispered something in their own language. Her voice was soft, musical, like a hidden song. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the emotion, gratitude, and something more. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small flask of heated water. Carefully, he handed it to Celine, who held it with trembling hands. The warmth made her shiver as if her body didn't remember what heat felt like. She took a sip, then passed it to Lyra, who drank slowly. Daniel smiled faintly. At least they were alive. As the firelight danced across the icy walls, Daniel studied them more closely. Their silver skin no longer looked pale and lifeless, but soft, glowing faintly under the warmth. Their hair, crystal-like strands of silver and blue, flowed gently as if touched by invisible winds, and their eyes, still glowing, watched him with a strange intensity. They were beautiful in a way that was not human, yet not frightening either. It was the kind of beauty that carried mystery. But Daniel reminded himself, beauty was not survival. Survival meant staying alert, staying smart. He stood and moved to the cave entrance, peeking outside. The storm was slowing, the wind calmer, but danger still waited. He thought he saw shadows moving in the snow, tall and mechanical. Drones maybe, or patrols. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Why were machines searching this frozen wasteland? Were they hunting for the sisters? Behind him, Lyra's voice trembled. Danger they come. Her broken English cut through the silence like a knife. Daniel turned sharply. You know them? She nodded weakly, pointing outside. Celine added in a whisper. They not save. They erase. The weight of her words sank in. Whoever those machines belonged to, they didn't want survivors. They wanted silence. Daniel clenched his fists. If the sisters were found, they'd be killed. If he was caught with them, he'd be killed too. He looked at the fire, at the two fragile figures huddled together. He could leave them, save himself. But as soon as the thought entered his mind, he shook it away. No, he couldn't. Not after pulling them from the snow, not after seeing their fear. His choice was already made. He walked back to them, kneeling down. We can't stay here, he said firmly. Lyra tilted her head, struggling to understand. He pointed to the fire, then the cave walls. Not safe. We move. They looked at each other, fear in their glowing eyes. But then Celine nodded slowly. Trust, Daniel, she whispered. The sound of his name on her lips was strange, almost sacred. He felt a shiver run through him. Daniel began to prepare. He tore strips of fabric from his extra gear, wrapping them around the sisters' hands and feet. To protect them from the cold, he tightened the blanket around their shoulders. He even gave them the last of his body heat pack, pressing it gently against Lyra's chest. Her eyes widened at the sudden warmth, and for the first time, she smiled, faintly. It was small, weak, but real, and in that smile Daniel felt his exhaustion fade just a little. The storm outside was finally breaking, the moons brighter in the sky. Daniel built a makeshift torch from scrap wood and set it aflame. He turned to the sisters, motioning for them to stand. They struggled at first, weak and trembling, but with his support they rose to their feet. Together they took slow steps toward the cave mouth. The snow outside glowed faintly under the twin moons, a frozen ocean of white. It was silent again, but not peaceful. Shadows still moved at the edge of the horizon, searching, hunting. Daniel felt the weight of danger pressing on him, but he also felt something else. A strange responsibility, a bond he hadn't expected. 2 lives now depended on him, and he had no plan except one: keep moving, keep them safe, whatever it cost. As they stepped into the snow, Lyra clung to his arm, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Celine walked just behind, her gaze scanning the icy desert nervously. The storm had ended, but their true fight was only beginning. Daniel tightened his grip on the torch. He whispered to himself, "Rescue isn't over yet." And in that moment, the night seemed to listen. The ice groaned. The shadows shifted. The frozen world held its breath, waiting for what came next. The snow crunched softly under their feet as Daniel led the sisters across the frozen plain. The torchlight flickered in the wind, casting long shadows over the ice. Lyra and Celine stayed close, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness with fear. Daniel could feel their weakness, every step a struggle for them. But he also sensed a quiet strength, a hidden fire behind their fragile bodies. Hours passed in silence, only the sound of boots and wind filling the night. Daniel's muscles ached, but he forced himself forward. The sisters leaned on him for balance, each step drawing them closer together. He wondered what kind of people they were, what kind of world they came from. Questions burned in his mind, but there had been no time to ask. Now, as the storm eased and the moons lit the path, he knew the moment had come. They reached a ridge of ice that formed a natural wall against the wind. Daniel stopped there, lowering the torch. He turned to the sisters, breathing hard. "Who are you?" he asked slowly, pointing to them. "Why, here." Lyra looked at Celine, their eyes locking as if sharing a silent message. Then Lyra stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart. Her voice trembled, but her words carried weight. "We, last of crew." Daniel frowned, trying to piece her. "Broken speech," Celine added, her voice softer but clearer. "Ship. Crash. No rescue." Her glowing eyes filled with sadness. Lyra touched the snow with her hand, tracing a shape. It was a simple drawing of a ship with wings. Breaking apart in the sky, Daniel stared at it, his heart heavy. They weren't just survivors, they were orphans of the stars, abandoned on this frozen wasteland. Lyra's voice grew sharper, her eyes glowing brighter. "Our people. No return. No care." She clenched her fist tightly. Celine placed a calming hand on her sister's arm, whispering words in their language. Daniel understood the meaning even without translation. Pain, betrayal, loss. He realized then that the sisters were not just victims of an accident, they had been left behind on purpose. "Why?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "Why leave you?" The sisters exchanged another look, their silence stretching long. Finally, Celine whispered, "We... secret." Her eyes shimmered with both fear and shame. Daniel leaned closer. "What secret?" Lyra shook her head quickly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Not safe. Speak," she whispered. Her gaze darted toward the horizon where faint lights flickered. Patrols. Still searching, Daniel's chest tightened. If their people had abandoned them, and if machines were hunting them, then the truth was far more dangerous than he imagined. The sisters huddled together, their silver hair shining under the moons. Daniel sat across from them, the torch planted in the snow between them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then quietly, Celine broke the silence. "You human? Why save?" Her voice was not suspicious, but curious, almost confused. Daniel blinked, surprised by the question. He looked at them, then at the torch. "Because life is life," he said slowly. "You need help. I help." His words were simple, but they seemed to strike deep. Lyra tilted her head, studying him carefully. Her glowing eyes searched his face, as if trying to see through him. "No human here," she whispered. "No rescue here, but you." She touched her chest again, whispering something in her own tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the tone carried something like devotion. Celine reached for her sister's hand, then looked at Daniel. Her voice trembled as she said, "You are chosen." The word hung in the cold air. Daniel felt a chill, not from the wind, but from the weight of it. "Chosen?" he repeated, his brow furrowed. Celine nodded slowly. "In our people, savior, become bond." Her eyes dropped to the snow, as if ashamed. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Did they mean what he thought they meant? That saving them was not just kindness, but something far greater in their culture. Lyra's hand suddenly gripped his, her skin cold, but her touch. Burning with emotion, she looked into his eyes, whispering fiercely, "You, ours now." Daniel froze, stunned by the intensity in her voice. He pulled his hand back gently, shaking his head. "No, I just saved you," he said softly. But the sisters both shook their heads. "To us, saving is forever." Celine whispered. The air grew heavy with unspoken meaning. Daniel felt the weight of their belief pressing on him. He wanted to argue, to explain, but the look in their glowing eyes stopped him. They weren't playing. They weren't confused. To them, this was truth. This was law. He realized then that his act of kindness had changed his fate. But before he could respond, a sharp sound echoed across the plain, a metallic hum, growing, louder. The sisters froze, fear flashing in their eyes. Daniel turned toward the sound, his muscles tensing. From the distance, glowing red lights pierced the snow. Machines, moving faster now, scanning the land. The sisters clutched his arms, their bodies shaking. "Hide," Lyra whispered urgently. "They come." Daniel grabbed the torch, pulling the sisters back toward the ridge. The shadows stretched across the snow, growing closer. He felt his heart pound like a drum. The revelations about the sisters filled his mind, but survival came first. Later, he would demand the truth. Later, he would understand what chosen really meant. But for now, only one thought mattered: keep them alive. The red lights grew brighter in the distance, glowing like the eyes of hungry beasts. Daniel pressed his back against the icy ridge, pulling Lyra and Celine down with him. The torch's flame flickered dangerously, so he smothered it with snow, leaving them in darkness. The only light now came from the glowing eyes of the sisters, shining softly in the night. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling silence. The machines moved closer, their shapes clearer now. Tall, metallic, walking on sharp legs that stabbed into the snow with a heavy rhythm. Their bodies were smooth and silver, with red lights scanning side to side. Every sweep of the beam cut across the frozen desert like a blade of fire. Daniel's breath froze in his throat. If the light touched them, they would be found. Lyra clung to his arm, her grip trembling. Her lips moved, whispering a word he almost didn't hear. Hunters. The way she said it made his skin crawl. Not rescuers, not patrols. These machines were predators built to track and kill. Daniel scanned the area quickly, his heart pounding. There was no cover on the plain, just endless white snow and ice. The ridge gave them some shadow, but not enough if the machines came closer. He thought fast, his mind racing through survival instincts. They had to move, but move carefully. "Follow," he whispered softly. The sisters nodded, their glowing eyes full of fear but also trust. Daniel crawled low across the snow, pulling them along. Every movement felt painfully slow, the cold seeping deeper into his bones. Behind them, the hunters' red light swept across the land. Closer, closer. The sound of their metal legs echoed like drums of war. They reached a crack in the ice wall, a narrow opening barely wide enough for a person. Daniel pushed the sisters inside first, then slipped in after them. The passage was tight, forcing them to crawl, their breaths echoing in the frozen tunnel. The air was sharp, icy needles biting his lungs, but it was shelter, a shield from the hunter's lights. The tunnel opened into a small chamber. Stalactites of ice hung from the ceiling like daggers. The sisters collapsed onto the ground, exhausted, their breaths fast and shallow. Daniel knelt, placing a hand on his knees, trying to calm his pounding heart. For now they were hidden, but he knew the hunters would not stop searching. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "They find us soon," she whispered. Celine nodded, her eyes wide with dread. "Hunters, no leave until done." Daniel's jaw tightened. He could see the terror in their faces. He wanted answers. He needed to know why these machines hunted them. But part of him already knew. The secret they carried. "Tell me," he demanded, quietly. "What do they want from you?" The sisters looked at each other, hesitation written across their glowing faces. Finally, Selene spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "They want, silence us." Daniel frowned. "Why? What did you do?" Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. "Not what we do. What we know." Her words echoed in the frozen chamber, heavy with meaning. Before Daniel could ask more, a deep metallic roar shook the walls. The hunters were near, their sensors scanning the ice. A red beam sliced across the opening of the tunnel. Daniel pulled the sisters close, holding them still. The beam lingered for a moment, then passed. But the sound of the machines grew louder. They were circling, hunting, waiting for the smallest mistake. Daniel's mind raced. They couldn't stay here forever. The hunters were tireless machines built for patience. Eventually they would find the crack and crawl inside. He looked at the sisters, their glowing eyes reflecting his fear. He had to think of something fast, he whispered. "If we run, can you keep up?" Lyra shook her head weakly. Celine bit her lip, her voice soft. "We..." "Slow," Daniel cursed under his breath. 2 weak survivors in an endless frozen wasteland. It was almost impossible. But almost was the only chance they had. He studied the chamber, his eyes landing on a sharp piece of broken ice. An idea formed. Dangerous, but the only one. He turned to them, his voice low but firm. "You stay hidden, I lead them away." Both sisters shook their heads fiercely, grabbing his arms. "No," Lyra whispered, her glowing eyes desperate. "Danger, you die." Selena's grip was even tighter. "If you go, we go." Daniel froze, surprised by the intensity of their refusal. They were weak, terrified, yet they would not let him face danger alone. In that moment he understood. To them, their bond was already sealed. The sound of the hunters drew closer. The ground shook with each step. Daniel made his choice. He placed his hands firmly on their shoulders, looking into their glowing eyes. "Then we move. Together." They nodded, fear and determination mixing on their faces. Slowly, carefully, they crawled back to the tunnel entrance. The red glow outside was stronger now, beams cutting across the snow like blades. Daniel gripped the shard of ice in one hand, his other arm steadying Celine. Lyra leaned against his side, whispering something in her language. A prayer, maybe. The air trembled with tension. Every step forward could be their last, but there was no turning back. As the first hunter's shadow passed over the ridge, Daniel whispered to himself, "Hidden danger or not, we fight to live." The cold night held its breath. The hunters prowled, and the true test of survival was about to begin. The red glow of the hunters cut across the snow, their long metallic legs stabbed into the ice with slow, steady rhythm. Each step was heavy, each movement precise. Daniel held his breath, gripping the shard of ice in his hand. Beside him, Lyra and Selene trembled, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The machines stopped suddenly, their sensors sweeping the land. One beam of red light passed close to the crack where they hid. It brushed across Daniel's boot and he froze. The light lingered, humming. Before sliding away, the hunters moved again, their claws scraping against frozen ground. Daniel knew they couldn't wait here any longer. The hunters were not leaving. They were tightening the search. Every minute, the circle grew smaller. Soon, the machines would find the crack and force their way inside. If that happened, there would be no escape. He looked at the sisters. "We move. Now," he whispered. They nodded, clutching the blanket around them tightly. Daniel led the way, crawling back through the tunnel. The ice walls pressed close, his breath echoing in the narrow space. Behind him, the sisters followed, their silver, hair brushing against the frozen stone. The tunnel opened into the plain once more. The moons cast pale light across the snow. The hunters were only 50 meters away, their red lights burning against the white ground. Daniel scanned the horizon quickly. Far to the east, he saw dark shapes rising. Wreckage half buried in the snow, a crashed shuttle, maybe shelter, maybe supplies. It was their only chance. "Run," he whispered, pulling the sisters forward. They stumbled through the snow, their feet sinking deep. Daniel wrapped an arm around each of them, half dragging, half carrying. Behind them, the hunters' sensors shifted. A loud metallic screech split the night. They had been seen. Red beams locked onto their bodies, slicing through the snow like fire. The hunters moved faster, their legs slamming into the ground. Daniel's heart pounded as he pulled the sisters forward. "Faster," he urged, though he knew their strength was nearly gone. The wreckage grew closer with every desperate step. Sharp pieces of metal stuck out of the ice, broken wings jutting like bones of a dead beast. Smoke still rose faintly from the ruins. Frozen in the cold air, Daniel pushed the sisters inside through a broken panel, then jumped after them. The hunters' claws scraped against the outer hull only seconds later. Inside, the air smelled of burnt fuel and melted metal. The sisters collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Daniel searched quickly, shining his small lamp across the dark interior. He found shattered seats, broken wires, and scattered crates. One crate was intact, frozen shut. He smashed it, open with a piece of metal. Inside were emergency supplies, blankets, glow sticks, and a small plasma cutter. He grabbed the cutter, its blue blade sparking to life. Finally, something he could use. The sisters' eyes widened as the light filled the wreck. Daniel turned to them, his voice firm. "Stay low. I hold them off." Celine shook her head. "No. Together," she whispered. Her glowing eyes filled with stubborn fire. Lyra added, her voice trembling but strong. "You save us once. We fight now." Before Daniel could argue, the hull shook violently. The hunters tore at the metal, their claws punching through. A red light pierced the wreck, scanning across the sisters. Daniel raised the plasma cutter, sparks flying. The first hunter shoved its head inside, red eyes burning like fire. It screeched, a sound like grinding steel. Daniel swung the cutter, slicing across its sensor. The machine reeled back, sparks bursting from its head. The wreck filled with noise. Metal, tearing, engines groaning. The hunters slammed against the walls, trying to break in. Daniel stood at the entrance, cutter in hand. Behind him, the sisters grabbed broken pipes and sharp scraps of metal. They were weak, but their determination burned, bright. For the first time, Daniel saw not just survivors, but fighters. The second hunter forced its claw inside, reaching for Lyra. She swung her piece of metal with all her strength. The claw sparked. Jerking back, Celine threw a shard of ice, hitting its sensor. The machine screeched again, retreating for a moment. Daniel lunged forward, driving the plasma cutter deep into the gap. Blue light sliced through the hunter's arm, sending it crashing into the snow outside, but there were more. Their shadows loomed against the wreck, their red lights circling like predators. Daniel pulled the sisters back, breathing hard. The cutter's power was draining fast, the glow dimming. He knew they couldn't fight them all. Escape was the only option. He pointed to a broken hatch at the rear of the shuttle. "Out, now." The sisters followed, crawling through the narrow passage. Daniel came last, sparks still flickering from the cutter. They emerged onto the far side of the wreck, hidden for the moment from the hunters. The snow stretched endless before them. But at the horizon, Daniel saw something. Dark cliffs rising like teeth. If they could reach the cliffs, they might find caves. Caves meant safety. The hunters screeched behind them, tearing through the wreckage. Daniel tightened his grip on the sisters. "No stopping," he whispered. They stumbled forward, every step a battle, every breath a knife in the lungs. The hunters gave chase, red lights flashing, claws tearing into the snow. The frozen night became a deadly race. Daniel pushed harder, pulling the sisters along. The cliffs grew larger with every step, shadows promising shelter. The machines roared behind them, faster, closer. But Daniel refused to stop. For the first time, he wasn't just running for his life, he was running for theirs too, and together they would not fall. The cliffs rose tall above them, sharp black teeth against the pale moons. Daniel's lungs burned as he dragged the sisters the final steps across the snow. Behind them, the hunters' screeches still echoed, but the machines had slowed, their heavy legs struggling with the deep ice near the rocks. For now, the cliffs gave them cover. For now, they had a chance. They reached the base of the cliffs, finding a narrow gap between two jagged walls. Daniel pushed the sisters inside, first, then followed quickly. The space opened into a hidden valley, a strange pocket of warmth in the frozen desert. Steam rose faintly from cracks in the ground where underground heat touched the surface. The snow here was thinner, patches of dark stone visible. For the first time in hours, Daniel felt a touch of relief. The sisters collapsed near a bubbling pool of warm water, their silver skin glowing faintly in the steam. Daniel knelt beside them, checking their breathing. They were exhausted, trembling, from cold and fear but alive. He dipped his hands into the warm pool, filling a flask and passing it to Selene. She drank slowly, then gave it to Lyra. Color returned to their faces, their glowing eyes brighter once more. Daniel leaned against the stone, finally allowing himself to breathe. His muscles ached, his chest was tight, and his hands shook from exhaustion. But his eyes never left the valley's entrance. The hunters might follow. This safety could be only temporary. Lyra stirred, lifting her head to look at him. Her voice was soft, broken English, but filled with meaning. "You save." Again. Daniel shook his head. "We survived together," he corrected. But Selene touched his hand gently, her silver fingers cool against his skin. Her voice was firm despite her weakness. "No. Without you, we die." The sisters exchanged a glance, then turned back to him. Their glowing eyes shimmered with something deeper than gratitude. Lyra whispered, "In our people, saving life, bind forever." Daniel's brow furrowed. He had heard this before, but now the words carried heavier weight. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cautious. Selene leaned closer, her eyes locked on his. "You save us. You become ours." The words hung in the warm air. Daniel felt a chill despite the heat rising from the ground. He shook his head quickly. "No, I only helped." But Lyra touched his arm, gripping it tightly. "Not only for us. Saving means bond, means promise." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not waver. "You choose us, or we lost." Daniel stood, pacing near the pool. The cliffs loomed around him, the steam rising like whispers of spirits. He had not asked for this. He had not planned it. He had wanted only to survive, to help where he could. But now these sisters looked at him as if his choice decided not only their lives, but their future. He felt the weight pressing on his chest, heavier than any snow. "You don't understand," Daniel said, his voice rough. "I can't stay here. I'm not from your world. I'm not part of your people." Selene shook her head gently, her voice calm but unyielding. "You are now. You are chosen," Lyra added quickly, her voice sharper, filled with fire. "We give all to you, life, bond, heart." Daniel stared at them, stunned by the intensity in their eyes. They weren't just clinging to him out of fear. They believed this with every piece of their being. To them, his act of rescue was not an accident. It was destiny. But to Daniel, it was just humanity, doing the right thing. Now that right thing had bound him to a promise he never made. The valley grew quiet, the only sound the bubbling water and the faint wind above the cliffs. Daniel sat down again, burying his face in his hands. He thought of his ship, waiting far beyond the snow plains. He thought of the stars he had planned to explore. He thought of freedom, the life of a traveler, never tied to one place. And now, he thought of these two sisters who looked at him with trust so deep it frightened him. Celine moved closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was gentle, steady. "You saved us. Now we give you choice," she whispered. Her glowing eyes searched his face with patience. "Stay with us, or leave us." Daniel's head snapped up, shocked. "Leave you? You wouldn't survive without me." Lyra leaned forward, her eyes burning. "Then stay." The words were so simple yet so final. Daniel felt trapped, torn between duty and desire for freedom. He wanted to help them, but he also feared the weight of their bond. He had not expected to become a savior, a protector, or more. And yet, here he was, standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. Before he could speak, a loud metallic screech echoed from the cliffs. The sisters froze, their glowing eyes wide with terror. The hunters had found the valley. Daniel stood quickly, gripping the plasma cutter he had carried. The glow was faint now, its power almost gone, but it was all he had. The sisters rose weakly, clutching each other's hands. Their choice was already made. They would not leave him. Daniel's heart pounded, the decision burning inside him. He could run alone and maybe escape, or he could stay and fight with them, binding himself to their fate forever. The valley trembled as the hunters drew near. The moment of choice had come. Daniel clenched his jaw. Lifting the cutter high, his voice was steady, fierce. "No more running," he said. The sisters' glowing eyes lit with fire. Together, they turned toward the sound of the hunters. Together, they would face what came next. The valley shook. As the hunters descended, red beams cut through the mist, slicing across stone and steam. Their metallic legs clanged against the cliffs, echoing like thunder. Daniel stood firm at the center of the valley, the plasma cutter glowing faintly in his hand beside him. Lyra and Celine held each other's arms, their glowing eyes filled with both fear and determination. The first hunter entered the valley, its tall frame bending as it scanned the ground. Its red beam locked onto Daniel, then shifted to the sisters. A screech of recognition filled the night. Daniel's grip tightened, sweat dripping down his brow despite the cold. The cutter's light flickered weakly, almost dying. He knew he had only 1 or 2 strikes left. The hunter charged, metal legs stabbing into the ground like spears. Daniel lunged forward, swinging the cutter across its chest. Blue sparks exploded, and the machine staggered back, screeching. But the cutter's glow dimmed further. He looked at it with despair. 1 more strike, maybe 2, then nothing. Another hunter crawled over the ridge, then another. The valley filled with their red lights, circling like predators. The sisters pressed closer to him, their voices trembling. "Daniel, we fight with you," Lyra whispered. Celine added, "No matter end, we stay." Their words gave him strength, but also fear. They were willing to die with him. He couldn't let that happen. The hunters advanced, claws scraping the stone. Daniel searched the valley desperately for an advantage. The steam pools bubbled, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Heat, pressure, maybe enough to use. He dragged the sisters behind a rock, whispering quickly, "Distract them. I lead them here." The sisters nodded, no hesitation in their eyes. Daniel felt a strange pride in them, fragile yet unbreakable. They split. Daniel running left, the sisters darting right. The hunters split too, beams chasing both paths. One machine followed Daniel, its legs pounding like drums. He ran past the largest steam pool, his chest burning. At the edge, he stopped suddenly. Turning to face it, the machine lunged, red light blazing. Daniel swung the cutter, aiming not for the hunter but for the ground. The blade cracked into the stone, steam exploded upward, scalding and thick. The hunter screeched, blinded, stumbling into the pool. Its metal frame hissed and cracked, sinking into boiling water. Daniel staggered back, coughing from the heat. The cutter flickered one last time, then went dark. He was weaponless now. But one hunter down gave him hope. Across the valley, Lyra and Celine fought with whatever they could find. They swung broken stones, threw shards of ice. They were weak, but their spirit was fierce. Daniel rushed to them, slamming into the second hunter with his full weight. The machine stumbled, crashing into a jagged rock. Its head split open, sparks flying. The sisters screamed together, their voices strange, almost harmonic. The sound echoed like a wave, confusing the machines for a moment. Daniel realized their voices were not just sound, they carried power. Another secret hidden inside them, but there was no time to ask. The final hunter dropped into the valley, larger than the others. Its red eye glowed brighter, its legs sharper. It roared, shaking the cliffs. Daniel stood in front of the sisters, spreading his arms. He had no weapon, no plan, only will. The hunter charged. At the last moment, Lyra and Celine stepped forward, standing beside him. They clasped his hands, glowing brighter than before. Their voices rose together, a haunting sound that filled the valley. The hunter froze, trembling as if struck by an unseen force. Its red light flickered, sputtering out. The machine collapsed, legs folding, sparks dying. Silence fell, broken only by the bubbling pools. Daniel stared at the sisters in shock. They had done what he could not. Their hidden power had ended the fight. Celine leaned against him, exhausted. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "This is why. They wanted us gone." Lyra nodded weakly, her eyes dimming. "We hold secret. Voice of stars. Weapon to them. Gift to us." Daniel finally understood. The sisters were not just survivors. They were the last carriers of something powerful. Their own people had feared them, abandoned them, and now they had chosen him, trusted him, tied their fate to his. He lowered himself beside them, wrapping his arms around their trembling bodies. The hunters lay silent in the valley, broken and steaming. The night sky above glowed with 2 moons, peaceful again. Daniel whispered, "You're safe now." "With me." Lyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes soft. Celine touched his hand gently. Both spoke together, their voices fragile but steady. "Then you are ours, forever." Daniel froze, his heart racing. He had fought to save them, but now they claimed him not just as savior, but as bond. He looked at the wreckage, the cliffs, the silent machines. A small laugh escaped his lips, half relief, half disbelief. He whispered under his breath, "I only wanted to explore planets, not end up in a double marriage." The sisters tilted their heads, not understanding the humor, but they smiled, leaning against him, and under the twin moons in the warmth of the hidden valley, Daniel realized something. His journey had changed, forever. Not just an explorer, not just a survivor, but protector, partner, chosen. And though the future was uncertain, one truth burned clear. He would never walk the stars alone again.